The morning sun was just breaking through the pine trees when Lisa grabbed her hiking boots from beside the front door. She had been looking forward to this walk all week. Her job as a veterinarian in the small town of Cedar Valley kept her busy, but Saturdays were hers. The forest trail behind her house was her favorite escape from the endless stream of sick cats and injured farm animals. She locked her small cabin and headed toward the familiar path that wound through Pine Ridge Forest. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of evergreen and wildflowers. This was exactly what she needed after a tough week at the clinic. Yesterday alone, she had treated 3 dogs, helped deliver twin calves, and stayed late to care for an injured owl someone had brought in. Lisa had been walking for about 30 minutes when she heard something strange. At first, she thought it might be an injured animal. Living this close to the wilderness, she often encountered deer with broken legs or birds with damaged wings. But as she listened more carefully, she realized the sound was different. It was deeper, more human. She stopped walking and tilted her head, trying to figure out where the noise was coming from. There it was again. A low groaning sound that seemed to be coming from somewhere below the main trail. Lisa carefully made her way through the thick bushes toward the edge of what she knew was a small ravine. When she looked down, her heart nearly stopped. About 15 feet below, a man was lying on his back near a pile of rocks. His clothes were torn and dirty, and even from this distance, she could see blood on his shirt. A beautiful brown horse stood nearby, pawing the ground nervously and whinnying softly. "Hey," Lisa called down. "Are you okay?" The man tried to lift his head but fell back with a groan. He mumbled something she couldn't understand. Lisa knew she had to act fast. In her line of work, she had seen enough injuries to know that this was serious. The man needed help, and he needed it now. Getting down to the ravine wasn't easy. Lisa had to find a spot where the slope wasn't too steep and carefully make her way down, grabbing onto branches and rocks to keep from falling herself. Her heart was pounding by the time she reached the injured man. Up close, she could see he was probably in his early 30s with dark hair and a strong build. He was wearing faded jeans, scuffed cowboy boots, and a blue flannel shirt that was now ripped and stained with blood. His face was pale and there was a nasty cut on his forehead. "Can you hear me?" Lisa asked, kneeling beside him. The man's eyes fluttered open. They were a striking blue, but they looked confused and unfocused. "My leg," he whispered. I think it's broken." Lisa carefully examined his right leg. It was definitely injured, possibly fractured, and was already starting to swell. She could tell from his pupils and the way he was having trouble staying conscious that he likely had a concussion too. "What's your name?" she asked. "Jake," he said weakly. "I was riding and the horse spooked. Something scared him. I don't remember much after that." Lisa looked around and noticed that Jake's saddle had come loose and was lying a few feet away. The horse, which she could now see was a magnificent animal with a glossy coat, was still acting nervous but hadn't run away. "Do you have a phone?" she asked Jake. He patted his pockets weakly and shook his head. "Must have fallen out." Lisa checked her own phone, but as she expected, there was no signal this deep in the forest. She was faced with a difficult decision. Jake needed medical attention, but she couldn't leave him alone while she went for help. He was clearly in shock and might lose consciousness completely. "Jake, I need to get you out of here," she said. "Do you think you can sit up?" With her help, Jake managed to get into a sitting position, though he was clearly in a lot of pain. Lisa had learned basic first aid as part of her veterinary training, and she knew the most important thing was to get him to safety and warmth. "Can you ride?" she asked, looking at the horse. Jake nodded slowly. "Ranger's a good horse. He won't give you trouble." It took nearly 20 minutes for Lisa to help Jake get back on his horse. She had to be very careful not to make his injuries worse. The horse Ranger stood perfectly still as if he understood how important it was to be gentle. Lisa led Ranger carefully out of the ravine, taking the longest but safest route. Jake held onto the saddle horn with both hands, his face tight with pain but determined not to fall off again. Every few minutes, Lisa would stop to check on him and make sure he was still conscious. The walk back to her cabin felt like it took forever. Lisa kept talking to Jake, asking him simple questions to keep him awake. She learned that he worked with cattle and had been riding in this area because he had heard it was beautiful. But whenever she asked more specific questions about where he came from or who she should contact, his answers became vague. "Don't worry about calling anyone," he said when she asked about his family. "I'll be fine." When they finally reached her cabin, Lisa faced another challenge: getting Jake inside and onto her couch. He was getting weaker and she was worried about how much blood he might have lost. Her cabin was small but comfortable, with a living room that opened into a tiny kitchen. She had turned the back bedroom into a home office where she sometimes worked on cases that needed extra attention. The couch in the living room was old but sturdy, and it would have to do as a temporary hospital bed. With great effort, she managed to help Jake inside and get him settled on the couch. She propped his injured leg up on pillows and covered him with a thick blanket. His skin was cold to the touch, which worried her. "I'm going to clean up that cut on your head," she told him. "Then I need to take a better look at your leg." Jake nodded weakly. He seemed to be fading in and out of consciousness now. Lisa worked quickly, using supplies from her veterinary kit. She cleaned the cut on his forehead and was relieved to see it wasn't as deep as she had feared. The leg was another matter. She could tell it was definitely broken, but she couldn't tell how badly without an X-ray. "Jake, I really think you need to go to the hospital," she said. "No hospitals," he mumbled. "Just need to rest." Something in his voice told Lisa not to push the issue right now. He was in no condition to argue, and moving him again might do more harm than good. She decided to monitor him closely and see how he was doing in a few hours. As the afternoon wore on, Lisa found herself constantly checking on her unexpected patient. She made sure he was warm, gave him small sips of water, and watched for signs that his condition was getting worse. She had dealt with injured animals countless times, but this was different. This was a human being who had somehow stumbled into her life, and she felt responsible for his recovery. Outside, she could hear Ranger moving around in her small yard. She went out to check on the horse and was amazed by how well-trained and gentle he was. This wasn't just any ranch horse. This animal had been cared for by someone who really knew what they were doing. As evening approached, Jake seemed to be sleeping more peacefully. His color was a little better and his breathing was steady. Lisa made herself a simple dinner and settled into the chair beside the couch, planning to keep watch through the night. She had no idea that this chance encounter would change both their lives forever. Lisa woke up in the chair beside her couch, her neck stiff from sleeping in an awkward position. The first rays of sunlight were streaming through her small living room window. She immediately looked over at Jake, who was still sleeping peacefully, under the thick blanket she had covered him with the night before. She quietly got up and went to the kitchen to make coffee. The events of yesterday felt almost like a dream, but the muddy boots by her front door and the injured man on her couch proved it had all been very real. As the coffee brewed, she heard Jake stirring in the living room. "Good morning," she said, softly, walking back with a steaming mug. "How are you feeling?" Jake tried to sit up but winced in pain. "Like I got kicked by a bull," he said with a weak smile. "But better than yesterday, I think." Lisa was relieved to see that his eyes looked clearer and more focused. The confusion from his concussion seemed to be lifting. She helped him sit up slowly and offered him some water. "I need to check your injuries," she said. "That leg still looks pretty swollen." As Lisa carefully examined his leg, Jake watched her work. She had gentle hands and seemed to know exactly what she was doing. "Are you a nurse?" he asked. "Veterinarian," Lisa replied. "I know it's not the same as human medicine, but I've dealt with plenty of broken bones and injuries." Jake chuckled despite his pain. "Well, I've been called worse things than an animal." Over the next few days, Lisa fell into a routine of caring for Jake. She would check his injuries every morning, make sure he ate something, and help him with basic needs. His leg was definitely broken, but it seemed to be a clean break that would heal on its own with rest and care. What puzzled Lisa was how little Jake told her about himself. Whenever she asked about his family or where he worked, he would give short answers and then change the subject. All she knew was that his name was Jake, he worked with cattle, and he had been riding alone when he fell. Don't you have anyone who's worried about you? She asked on the third day. A wife? Girlfriend? Family? Jake looked uncomfortable. I'm not married, he said, and I told my boss I might be gone for a while. He won't expect me back for a few days. Lisa found this hard to believe. In her small town, if someone went missing, for even one day people would be organizing search parties. But Jake seemed adamant that no one was looking for him. What about your horse? She asked. Ranger is a beautiful animal. He must be worth quite a bit. He's a good horse, Jake agreed. Been with me for years. Lisa had been around horses her whole life, and she could tell that Ranger wasn't just any ordinary ranch horse. His coat was glossy and well-maintained. His hooves were perfectly trimmed, and his saddle and bridle were made of expensive leather. This was the kind of horse that cost thousands of dollars, not something a typical ranch hand would own. There were other things that didn't add up either. Jake's hands were rough and calloused like someone who worked outdoors, but they weren't, as weathered as most of the ranch workers she knew. His boots were expensive even though they were scuffed up from the accident. And sometimes when he talked about cattle and ranching, he sounded more like someone who gave orders than someone who took them. But despite her curiosity, Lisa didn't push too hard for answers. Jake was clearly a private person, and she respected that. More importantly, she was starting to enjoy his company. On the fourth day, Jake insisted on getting up and moving around. Lisa helped him hobble to the kitchen table, where they shared breakfast together. It was the first normal conversation they had been able to have since the accident. Tell me about being a vet, Jake said. That must be interesting work. Lisa found herself talking more than she had in months. She told him about some of her favorite cases, like the time she helped deliver puppies during a thunderstorm, or when she nursed an abandoned fawn back to health. Jake listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and seeming genuinely interested in her stories. You really love what you do, he observed. I do, Lisa said. It's not glamorous, and I'm not getting rich doing it, but I can't imagine doing anything else. There's something special about helping animals that can't help themselves. Jake nodded thoughtfully. I know what you mean. I feel the same way about the land and the animals I work with. As the days passed, Jake grew stronger. By the end of the first week, he was able to walk short distances with Lisa's help. His leg was still sore and needed to be kept elevated, but the swelling had gone down significantly. Lisa was amazed by how helpful Jake tried to be despite his injury. He insisted on doing small tasks around the cabin, like washing dishes or folding laundry. When she protested that he should rest, he would just smile and say he didn't like sitting around doing nothing. I'm used to being busy, he explained. This is the longest I've sat still in years. One morning, Lisa woke up to find Jake sitting on her front porch, fully dressed and looking out at the forest. His color was much better, and he seemed almost back to his normal self. You're feeling better, she said, joining him on the porch with 2 cups of coffee. Much better, thanks to you, Jake said. I don't know how to repay you for everything you've done. Lisa felt a strange flutter in her stomach. Over the past week, she had grown accustomed to having Jake around. Her small cabin felt less lonely with him there, and she looked forward to their conversations over meals. You don't owe me anything, she said. Anyone would have done the same thing. Jake turned to look at her directly. No, they wouldn't have. Not everyone would take in a complete stranger and nurse them back to health without asking for anything in return. There was something in his voice that made Lisa think he was speaking from experience. But before she could ask what he meant, Jake changed the subject. I should probably think about heading home soon, he said. My leg feels strong enough to ride, and I've imposed on your kindness long enough. Lisa felt her heart sink a little. She had known this day would come, but she wasn't ready for it. Are you sure you're well enough to travel? I think so, Jake said. But I want you to know that this week has meant a lot to me, more than you realize. Lisa looked out at Ranger, who was grazing peacefully in her small yard. The horse had settled in as comfortably as his owner, and she would miss both of them. Will I see you again? She asked, surprised by how much she hoped the answer would be yes. Jake was quiet for a long moment. I hope so, he said finally. But my life is complicated. I'm not sure when I'll be back in this area. Lisa nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. She had enjoyed having someone to talk to, someone who listened to her stories and seemed to understand her love for her work. Jake was different from the men she usually met in Cedar Valley. He was thoughtful and kind, and there was something mysterious about him that intrigued her. As they sat on the porch in comfortable silence, Lisa found herself wishing that Jake's recovery could take just a little bit longer. She wasn't ready to go back to her quiet, solitary life just yet. Jake didn't leave the next day as he had planned. When Lisa woke up that morning, she found him standing by her broken fence, examining the damaged wooden posts that had been bothering her for months. "This needs fixing," he said when she walked over with his morning coffee. "The wood is rotting, and if we get a strong wind, the whole thing could come down." "I know," Lisa sighed. "I've been meaning to call someone to fix it, but good handymen are expensive and hard to find around here." Jake tested the stability of one of the posts. "I could fix this for you. It's the least I can do after everything you've done for me." Lisa was about to protest, but Jake held up his hand. "My leg feels fine, and I know my way around tools. Besides, I can't leave knowing this fence might fall down and let your neighbor's cattle wander onto your property." That afternoon, Jake rode Ranger into town to buy supplies. Lisa had offered to drive him, but he insisted he was fine to ride. When he returned a few hours later, Lisa was surprised to see how much he had bought. Not just the basic material she expected, but high-quality wood, professional-grade tools, and enough supplies to completely rebuild the entire fence. "Jake, this must have cost a fortune," she said, looking at everything loaded on a small trailer he had somehow acquired. "Don't worry about it," Jake said casually. "I had some money saved up." Lisa found this puzzling. Ranch hands didn't usually have hundreds of dollars lying around for expensive fencing materials. But Jake was already unloading the supplies, and she decided not to question his generosity. Over the next 3 days, Lisa watched in amazement as Jake completely transformed her property. He worked with the skill and confidence of someone who had done this kind of work many times before. But what surprised her most was how he approached the job. Instead of just fixing the broken sections, he planned out the entire project like an engineer, measuring everything precisely and making sure each post was perfectly aligned. "You're really good at this," Lisa said on the second day, bringing him a cold drink while he worked. Jake wiped the sweat from his forehead. "I've built a lot of fences over the years." "For the ranch where you work?" Jake hesitated for just a moment before nodding. "Yeah, among other places." That evening, they sat on Lisa's porch admiring the day's progress. The new fence looked professional and sturdy, much better than anything Lisa could have afforded to have built. "I have a confession," Jake said. "I actually enjoy this kind of work more than more than some of the other things I have to do." Lisa noticed his pause but didn't comment on it. "Well, you're certainly talented. That fence is going to last for years." The next morning, Lisa woke up to the sound of her truck engine running. She looked out her window and saw Jake under the hood, tools spread out on a tarp beside him. "What are you doing?" she called out, still in her pajamas. "Your truck was making a weird noise yesterday," Jake called back. "Thought I'd take a look." An hour later, Jake had not only identified the problem but completely fixed it. Lisa's truck, which had been running rough for months, now purred like it was brand new. "How did you know how to do that?" Lisa asked, genuinely impressed. Jake shrugged. "You pick up things when you work on a ranch. Trucks, tractors, equipment. If it breaks down, you learn to fix it or you don't get your work done." But Lisa was beginning to notice that Jake's knowledge went far beyond basic ranch maintenance. When he fixed her truck, he had diagnosed the problem instantly and knew exactly which parts to replace. When he built her fence, he had planned it with the precision of a professional contractor. These weren't the skills of an ordinary ranch hand. Later that week, Lisa had an emergency call from the Henderson farm. Their prize bull had gotten tangled in barbed wire and needed immediate attention. Lisa grabbed her veterinary bag and was heading for her truck when Jake stopped her. "Mind if I come along?" he asked. "I'd like to see how you work." At the Henderson farm, Lisa worked carefully to free the bull and treat its wounds. The animal was huge and agitated, and Mr. Henderson was having trouble keeping it calm. "That's When Jake stepped in, "Easy, big guy," Jake said in a low, soothing voice, approaching the bull slowly. To everyone's amazement, the massive animal immediately settled down. Jake seemed to have a natural way with cattle that even impressed the experienced farmer. "Son, you sure know your way around livestock," Mr. Henderson said after Lisa had finished, treating the bull. "You looking for work? I could use someone with your skills." Jake smiled politely. "Thanks, but I already have a job." As they drove back to Lisa's cabin, she couldn't help but comment on what she had witnessed. "That was incredible back there. I've never seen anyone calm down an angry bull so quickly." "Bulls are just big, scared animals most of the time," Jake said. "You just have to understand what they're thinking." "Where did you learn so much about cattle?" Jake was quiet for a moment. "I grew up around them, been working with cattle my whole life." Over the following days, Jake continued to find ways to help around Lisa's property. He repaired her leaky roof, fixed a broken step on her porch, and even organized her cluttered storage shed. But what Lisa enjoyed most were their long conversations in the evenings. Jake was an excellent listener and seemed genuinely interested in her stories about veterinary work. He asked thoughtful questions and offered insights that showed he understood both animals and the challenges of rural life. Lisa found herself sharing things she had never told anyone, including her dreams of maybe opening a larger practice someday, or her worries about whether she was making a real difference in her small town. "You make more of a difference than you realize," Jake told her one evening as they watched the sunset. "The way you care for animals, the way you helped me when I was hurt, that matters. Not everyone has that kind of heart." Lisa felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. "What about you? What are your dreams?" Jake was quiet for a long time. "I used to think I knew what I wanted," he said finally. "But lately I've been questioning everything. Sometimes I think the life I'm supposed to live isn't the life I actually want." "What do you mean?" Jake turned to look at her. "This week, staying here with you, working with my hands, having real conversations, it's made me realize what I've been missing. My regular life is, well, it's complicated. There are expectations, responsibilities, people depending on me. But here I feel like I can just be myself." Lisa felt her heart racing. There was something in Jake's voice, a vulnerability she hadn't heard before. "Maybe you don't have to go back to that life," she said quietly. Jake smiled sadly. If only it were that simple. That night, as Lisa lay in bed, she realized that her feelings for Jake had grown into something much deeper than gratitude or friendship. She was falling in love with this mysterious man who had wandered into her life. But she also knew that he was keeping secrets from her, and soon he would have to return to whatever life he had left behind. The thought of Jake leaving filled her with a sadness she hadn't expected. Her quiet, simple life had seemed perfectly content before he arrived. Now the idea of going back to eating dinner alone and having no one to share her thoughts with felt unbearable. As she drifted off to sleep, Lisa found herself hoping that whatever complications Jake was referring to, they could be overcome. She was beginning to believe that some people were worth fighting for, worth taking risks for. She just hoped Jake felt the same way about her. Lisa was hanging laundry on the line behind her cabin when she heard the sound. At first, she thought it might be a low-flying plane, but as the noise grew louder, she realized it was a helicopter. In Cedar Valley, helicopters usually meant one of two things: a medical emergency or a search and rescue operation. She walked around to the front of her cabin and shaded her eyes against the afternoon sun. The helicopter was definitely heading in her direction, and it was getting closer by the second. Jake, who had been fixing a loose board on her porch steps, stood up and watched the aircraft approach with an expression Lisa had never seen before. He looked worried, almost frightened. "Do you think someone's in trouble?" Lisa asked. Jake didn't answer. He was staring at the helicopter with a look that made Lisa's stomach twist with unease. Something about his reaction told her this wasn't a coincidence. The helicopter circled once before landing in the small clearing beside Lisa's property. As the rotor blades slowed down, Lisa could see that this wasn't a rescue helicopter. It was sleek and expensive looking, the kind that wealthy people used for private transportation. 3 people climbed out of the aircraft. The first was a woman, in her 30s, dressed in a crisp business suit and carrying a briefcase. Behind her came 2 men in dark suits who looked like they might be security guards or bodyguards. All 3 of them walked directly toward Jake as if they knew exactly who they were looking for. "Jacob," the woman called out, her voice carrying a mixture of relief and frustration. "Thank God you're alive. Do you have any idea how worried we've all been?" Lisa felt the world tilt around her. Jacob. Who was Jacob? The woman reached Jake and threw her arms around him in a fierce hug. "We've had search teams combing these mountains for 2 weeks," she said. "When Ranger came back without you, we feared the worst." Jake looked uncomfortable with the embrace and gently stepped back. "I'm fine, Rebecca. I told you I needed some time alone." "Time alone?" Rebecca's voice rose. "Jake, you disappeared without a word. The board meeting was 3 days ago. The investors are asking questions. Dad's been having chest pains from the stress." Lisa stood frozen, trying to make sense of what she was hearing. Board meeting? Investors? Dad having chest pains? None of this matched with anything Jake had told her about being a ranch hand. Rebecca finally seemed to notice Lisa standing nearby. "Who is this?" she asked, looking Lisa up and down in a way that made her feel suddenly self-conscious about her simple clothes and work boots. "This is Lisa," Jake said quietly. "She saved my life. I had an accident, and she took care of me." Rebecca's expression softened slightly. "An accident? Are you hurt?" "I broke my leg, had a concussion. Lisa nursed me back to health." Rebecca turned to Lisa with what appeared to be genuine gratitude. "Thank you so much for taking care of my brother. We've been so worried." "Brother?" Lisa's mind was reeling. Jake had never mentioned having a sister, especially not one who arrived in private helicopters and talked about board meetings. "I'm Rebecca Thornton," the woman continued, extending her hand to Lisa. "Jake's sister." Thornton. Lisa knew that name. Everyone in this part of the country knew that name. Thornton Industries was one of the largest cattle and energy companies in the region, with ranches and oil wells spread across several states. They were the kind of people who made headlines in business magazines and donated wings to hospitals. "You're Jake Thornton?" Lisa said slowly, the pieces finally falling into place. "As in Thornton Industries." Jake's face flushed. "Lisa, I can explain. You're not a ranch hand," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're Jake Thornton. Your family owns half the ranches in 3 states. Rebecca looked confused. "Jake, what did you tell her?" "I told her I worked with cattle," Jake said, defensively. That's not exactly a lie. Lisa felt like she couldn't breathe. Everything Jake had told her, everything they had shared, had been built on deception. "You lied to me," she said. "I didn't lie, not really. I didn't tell you everything." "Everything?" Lisa's voice was getting louder. "You didn't tell me anything. I thought you were a regular person, someone like me. But you're..." She gestured helplessly at the helicopter, at Rebecca's expensive clothes, at the whole surreal scene. "I'm the same person I was 5 minutes ago," Jake said desperately. "Nothing has changed." "Everything has changed," Lisa shot back. "Do you have any idea what your family's company has been doing around here? Thornton Industries has been buying up small ranches, putting local people out of business. They're planning to build some kind of energy facility that will destroy half the grazing land in the county." Rebecca stepped forward. "Actually, that's one of the reasons we needed to find Jake so urgently. The county planning meeting is tomorrow, and we need his vote on the expansion project." Lisa stared at Jake, in disbelief. "You're part of that? You're helping to destroy this community?" "It's not that simple," Jake said. "The project would bring jobs, economic development." "It would destroy the way of life for hundreds of families," Lisa interrupted, "including some of my clients who depend on that grazing land for their livestock." The irony of the situation wasn't lost on her. Here she was, arguing with a man about protecting the local ranching community, when she had spent the last 2 weeks nursing him back to health and falling in love with him. Lisa, please let me explain, Jake said, taking a step toward her. Explain what? How you've been lying to me since the day I found you. How you let me think you were someone you're not. How you've been playing some kind of game while I... Lisa stopped herself before she said too much, but Jake seemed to understand what she had been about to say. While you what? Lisa felt tears stinging her eyes. While I started to care about you. While I thought maybe you cared about me too. I do care about you, Jake said urgently. More than you know. More than I ever expected to. Rebecca cleared her throat. Jake, we really need to go. The jet is waiting and we have that early meeting tomorrow. The jet? Of course they had a jet. Lisa felt like she was living in some kind of bizarre dream where the man she had been sharing simple meals and quiet conversations with was actually one of the wealthiest people in the state. Go, Lisa said, turning away. Go back to your real life. Lisa, wait, Jake called after her, but Lisa was already walking toward her cabin. She couldn't bear to look at him anymore. Couldn't stand to see the expensive helicopter and the sister in her designer suit, and the whole overwhelming reality of who Jake really was. She heard voices behind her as Jake argued with Rebecca, but she couldn't make out the words. A few minutes later, she heard the helicopter engine starting up again. From her kitchen window, Lisa watched as the aircraft lifted off and disappeared over the tree line. Jake was gone, back to his world of board meetings and business decisions, and corporate jets, back to a life that was as far from her simple cabin as the moon. Lisa sank into her kitchen chair and put her head in her hands. She felt foolish and used and heartbroken all at the same time. How could she have been so naive? How could she have believed that someone like Jake would really be interested in someone like her? But even as she sat there feeling sorry for herself, part of her couldn't forget the look in Jake's eyes when he had told her he cared about her. Had that been real, or had it just been part of the deception? She looked out at her newly repaired fence, at her perfectly running truck, at all the improvements Jake had made to her property. Had he done those things out of genuine kindness, or had it all been some kind of elaborate game to pass the time while he recovered? As the sun set over the mountains, Lisa realized that the hardest part wasn't feeling deceived. The hardest part was that despite everything, despite the lies and the shock and the impossibility of it all, she was still in love with him. 3 weeks passed without a word from Jake. Lisa threw herself into her work, treating more animals than ever, and staying busy from dawn until dark. But no matter how tired she made herself, she couldn't stop thinking about him. Every time she looked at her perfectly repaired fence or heard her truck running smoothly, she was reminded of the man who had fixed them. The local newspaper ran a story about the Thornton Industries expansion project being suddenly put on hold. According to the article, there had been disagreements within the company about the environmental impact and effects on local ranchers. Lisa wondered if Jake had anything to do with the delay, but she tried not to get her hopes up. One morning, Lisa was treating a sick horse at the Morrison Ranch when Mrs. Morrison mentioned something that caught her attention. "Did you hear about that new veterinary fund?" Mrs. Morrison asked. "Someone's setting up money to help ranchers afford better medical care for their animals. They're calling it the Rural Animal Care Foundation." Lisa hadn't heard anything about it. "Who's behind it?" "Nobody knows for sure. They're keeping it quiet, but whoever it is has deep pockets. They're talking about building a proper veterinary hospital right here in Cedar Valley." That afternoon, Lisa drove into town to learn more about this mysterious foundation. At the bank, she spoke with Mr. Peters, who handled most of the business accounts in town. "It's the strangest thing," Mr. Peters said, adjusting his glasses. "The paperwork came through last week. Someone deposited enough money to fund veterinary services for the entire county for the next 10 years, but they want to remain anonymous." "Any idea who it could be?" Lisa asked. Mr. Peters shrugged. "Has to be someone with serious money. We're talking millions of dollars here." As Lisa drove home, she couldn't shake the feeling that she knew exactly who was behind the foundation. But she told herself not to jump to conclusions. Rich people donated money to causes all the time. It didn't necessarily mean anything personal. 2 days later, Lisa was surprised to see a familiar figure walking up her driveway. It was Rebecca, but this time she was alone and dressed in jeans and a simple sweater instead of her business suit. "Hello, Lisa," Rebecca said when Lisa came out to greet her. "Do you have a few minutes to talk?" Lisa nodded and invited her inside. Rebecca looked around the small cabin with what seemed like genuine interest rather than judgment. "This is lovely," Rebecca said. "I can see why Jake felt so comfortable here." They sat at Lisa's kitchen table and Rebecca got straight to the point. "I came to apologize for the way things happened when we picked up Jake. I didn't understand the situation." "There's nothing to apologize for," Lisa said. "You were just looking for your brother." "Yes, but I didn't realize." Rebecca paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "I didn't realize how much this place meant to him. How much you meant to him." Lisa felt her heart skip a beat, but she tried to keep her expression neutral. "Jake made his choice when he left." "Did he?" Rebecca asked. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like he's been trying to find a way back ever since." Rebecca went on to explain that Jake had been different since returning home. He had refused to vote on the expansion project, effectively killing it. He had also started the Rural Animal Care Foundation, though he had insisted on keeping his involvement secret. "He's been miserable," Rebecca said. "He goes through the motions at work, but his heart isn't in it. All he talks about is this place and you." Lisa felt tears forming in her eyes. "Then why hasn't he come back?" "Because he's scared," Rebecca said simply. "Jake has never been good at putting himself out there emotionally. And after the way he handled things with you, he's convinced you hate him." "I don't hate him," Lisa whispered. "I know. That's why I'm here." Rebecca reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "The foundation is looking for a director, someone to oversee the new veterinary hospital and coordinate services for rural areas. The salary would be enough to let you expand your practice while still serving the community you love." Lisa stared at the card. "He's offering me a job?" "He's offering you a chance to make your dreams come true. The question is whether you're willing to work with him to do it." After Rebecca left, Lisa spent the rest of the day thinking. She walked through the forest where she had first found Jake, trying to sort through her complicated feelings. She was still hurt by his deception, but she was beginning to understand why he had kept his identity secret. In his world, people probably wanted things from him all the time. With her, he had been able to just be himself. The next morning, Lisa made her decision. She drove to the address Rebecca had given her, which turned out to be a small office building in the next town. Jake was there, sitting behind a desk covered with architectural plans and veterinary equipment catalogs. When he saw her, his face lit up with hope and anxiety. "Lisa, you came." "Rebecca told me about the foundation," Lisa said, taking a seat across from him. "And about the job offer." Jake leaned forward. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you after the way I lied to you. But this foundation, this hospital, it's all real. We could really make a difference for animals and ranchers in this whole region." "Why?" Lisa asked. "Why are you doing this?" Jake was quiet for a moment. "Because these past few weeks without you have been the worst of my life. Because I finally found something worth fighting for and I threw it away by being a coward." "You weren't a coward," Lisa said softly. "You were protecting yourself." "Maybe. But I hurt you in the process, and I can't forgive myself for that." Lisa looked at the plans spread across his desk. They showed a modern veterinary hospital with state-of-the-art equipment, but designed to fit naturally into the rural landscape. There were also plans for mobile clinics that could reach the most remote ranches. "This would really help a lot of animals," she said. "That's the idea. But more than that, I was hoping it might give us a chance to start over, to build something together." Lisa met his eyes. "What about your family's business, your responsibilities?" "I've made my choice," Jake said. "Rebecca is taking over more of the day-to-day operations. I'll still be involved, but I want my focus to be here, on this foundation, on this community." He paused. "On you, if you'll let me." Lisa felt her heart racing. "Jake, our worlds are so different. I don't know anything about your life, about being part of a wealthy family, and I don't know anything about finding contentment in a simple life, Jake replied. But I'd like to learn. You taught me that there's more to life than board meetings and profit margins. You showed me what it means to help others just because it's the right thing to do. Lisa looked around the small office, imagining what the veterinary hospital could become. She thought about all the animals she could help, all the ranchers who struggled to afford proper care for their livestock. If I take this job, she said finally, I want to do it right. No special treatment because of our personal relationship. No shortcuts or favors. Jake smiled. I wouldn't expect anything less from you. Lisa stood up and extended her hand. Then I accept the position, Mr. Thornton. Jake stood and took her hand, but instead of shaking it, he held it gently. Does this mean you forgive me? It means I'm willing to try, Lisa said. But we're starting over, getting to know each other honestly this time. 6 months later, the Cedar Valley Animal Hospital held its grand opening. Lisa had worked tirelessly to make it everything she had dreamed of and more. Jake had been true to his word, giving her complete control over the medical decisions while providing whatever resources she needed. Their relationship had grown slowly and carefully. They had taken time to really get to know each other without secrets or pretense. Lisa had learned about the pressures and responsibilities that came with Jake's wealth, while Jake had discovered the deep satisfaction that came from meaningful work. On the day of the hospital's opening, the whole community turned out to celebrate. Ranchers brought their families, local business owners gave speeches, and even some of Jake's business associates attended. As Lisa looked around at the crowd of people who would benefit from the new facility, she felt Jake's hand slip into hers. Any regrets? He asked quietly. Lisa squeezed his hand and smiled. Only that it took us so long to get here. That evening, after all the guests had gone home, Lisa and Jake sat on the porch of her cabin, watching the sunset over the mountains. Ranger grazed peacefully in the yard and everything felt exactly as it should be. I have something for you, Jake said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Lisa's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a simple but beautiful diamond ring. I know we said we were starting over, Jake said, but I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me? Lisa looked at the ring, then at Jake's hopeful face, then out at the peaceful scene around them. This was her world, but now it was his world too. Yes, she said, and sealed it with a kiss that tasted like new beginnings.